Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education in Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. All right, I hope everybody is doing well. I certainly am, and I appreciate you tuning in and watching this video. I've been trying to think of what I wanted to say about this past week, and a whole lot of thoughts came through my mind, but I settled on this one. Trump and MAGA made systemic governmental racism much easier. Let me say it again. Trump and MAGA made systemic governmental racism much easier. They released so many executive orders that impacted the federal government as it relates to African Americans in such rapid pace, I couldn't keep up with it all. I have so many things to say about what has been done this past week, but so much came out, and I'm sure so much more is about to come, that it's just going to take me a couple of days to get my head around it all, because I'm not the one who's trying to say the first things. I am trying to say what is thought out and what informs you the most. What really allows you to look inside legally from a Black civil rights perspective, what has occurred. All right, so with that said, let's go to another screen. I want to show you exactly what I'm saying. So Trump and MAGA this past week made legalized systemic racism much easier. What is systemic racism? And I have to ask that question because, look, too many people, African-American people, still don't understand that the real issue is systemic racism, not just individual racism, but systemic racism. So let's try to define it. Frederick Douglass described it this way. He said, quote, "In nearly every department of American life, Black Americans are confronted by this insidious influence. It fills the air. All right, it fills the air. So every breath you take, you're breathing in systemic racism. There's nowhere you can go where there's not systemic racism. It's pervasive. It meets them at the workshop and factory, so it's on your job. When they apply for work, it's in the Human Resources Office. It meets them at the church. Even at your church, you're dealing with systemic racism. At the hotel, when you want to book a room, you're dealing with systemic racism. At the ballot box, you're dealing with systemic racism. And worst of all, it meets them in the jury box. And he said worst of all because when there's systemic racism in the jury box, then the criminal justice system is just not going to be for us. The Black American has ceased to be a slave of an individual. It's not about just the racism on the plantation. Mr. Douglass says, but has in some sense become the slave of society. Again, something that is really, really, really pervasive everywhere you go. Hello, everyone. I got great news. The merch is finally here. We've been waiting and waiting, but we can finally begin branding our channel. But we need your help to get our brand out there. If you like what we provide and like what you see, please go to the channel and grab your hoodie, your t-shirt, your mug, and we got more designs and products on the way. Just visit our YouTube channel at the Defiant Lawyers Network. Also, we will donate a portion of each dollar you spend on our merch towards some nonprofit. And remember, as always, stay woke. You've heard me say, it's not the shark in the ocean, it's the ocean itself that contains this systemic racism that I'm talking about. Hence, in a nutshell, systemic racism is the pervasive discriminatory practices and procedures embedded in the institutions of America, including the federal government. So back to my initial statement, Trump made it easier for the institution of the federal government to become all white. There are no efforts any longer set aside to try to include, to try to create a diverse, racially diverse workforce in the federal government. And Trump hasn't stopped there, right? They formed an organization, they formed a law firm to pressure and to force private entities to also abandon their DEI measures, Target being the last one. Now, I have a separate video coming out talking about Target and whether or not losing DEI hurt Black people specifically, because there are people out here who say losing DEI helps Black people. I'm going to address that in an upcoming video. All right, let's keep looking at this. So Trump made it easier for the federal government to become all white. There's no longer any incentive, any sort of rewards or awards for the federal government to include African-American employees. And when you think about the fact that Trump is trying to gut the federal workforce and replace those workers with his political appointees and MAGA followers, then that's going to result in a whole lot of unemployed African-American people and no incentive to replace those unemployed African-American people with other African-American people. The economic consequences for this, for African-American communities, will be great. And we are talking about a community that already has so much less wealth than white Americans. I don't even see why they're so upset about DEI when they control nearly 99% of the wealth in this country. I don't get it. I mean, we control, last I read, from 3 to 5% of this nation's wealth. That means at least 95% of this nation's wealth, whites control. Yet they keep hammering, they keep hammering, they keep hammering. So how did Trump make systemic governmental racism easier? Well, largely by executive action. One, trying to eliminate birthright citizenship. I have another video coming out showing you that birthright citizenship, trying to eliminate birthright citizenship, does not just impact Hispanics. When you hear someone say that, you know off the bat that you are not talking about an attorney. That is not a person who has studied the law and knows the Constitution. What else? Trump has made systemic governmental racism easier also by planning to terminate employment for federal employees, like I just said, including many Blacks, getting rid of what they call the deep state. Also by rescinding DEI initiatives within the federal government, as I just alluded to, by ordering all federal DEI officers to be placed on immediate leave pending elimination. So all those folks who look after the DEI programs, they're being fired basically and are right now on immediate leave. They no longer have jobs because there will no longer be any DEI programs for them to oversee. By rescinding a key civil rights rule ordered by Lyndon Johnson in 1965, a huge executive order that essentially put DEI in federal contracting, basically, which is very important. And I showed you in a previous video that Blacks received in 2021 about $9 billion in federal contracting. It wasn't as much as the other groups, but it was still $9 billion. And we just needed to continue to fight for more. But losing $9 billion for the African-American community is significant. It's significant. All right, let's go back. By suspending all civil rights investigations except for reverse discrimination cases. So if an African-American person, and we deal with this as a civil rights firm, if someone walks into our doors and has a civil rights complaint, and a legitimate one, one that we believe is triable, viable, right now, what we will get from the local U.S. Attorney's Office is we're not doing that right now. We're not opening any new investigations. We're not filing any new civil rights cases. We're not opening any new civil rights investigations at all. Sorry. Elections have consequences. All right? So that's really, really, really serious, because when one of us is violated in some way, when our civil rights are violated, we have to go to the United States government because they handle all civil rights investigations. Well, right now, Trump has it all shut down. I covered that in a video a couple of days ago. See, this is serious, folks. Suspending consent decrees. I talked about that also. Those are agreements between police departments and the federal government to stop their pattern and practices of violating the civil rights of African American people. Suspending PEPFAR, which is a very successful program that helps fight HIV in Africa. President Bush, the younger man, he put that in place, and it has saved over 20 million lives in Africa. Trump reportedly has rescinded that program. Rescinding civil rights rules in the Department of Education promulgated by Biden. Any civil rights rules that Biden put in place, be it in the Department of Education, be it in HUD, wherever it is, Trump will order them rescinded. You see, all of this is targeted toward us African Americans. Directing the Attorney General to seek reversals of U.S. Supreme Court precedents that limit application of the death penalty in state and federal jurisdictions. Huge. One of the celebrated and famed Black civil rights attorneys, Bryant Stevenson, of the Equal Justice Initiative, successfully argued against putting juveniles to death. Well, Trump here is directing the AG to seek reversals of U.S. Supreme Court cases. In other words, try to get SCOTUS to change its mind about putting people to death, for example, juveniles, or those who have mental issues. This is really something. And if you don't know, African Americans are on death row disproportionately. And much more is coming, folks. Much more. So these anti-Black measures indicate dark and dangerous days are ahead for our community. Many Blacks don't really even understand what happened. And a lot of them are diminishing or dismissing what Trump did this past week. And yes, some helped him do it by not voting or voting for him. All right, so as I said in the opener, yes, Trump and MAGA have made it much easier for systemic governmental racism to abound. And this is just the first week of this man's administration. I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video. And as always, remain woke. Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. You are not going to believe what I am about to tell you. Now, I'm not shocked. But I bet you're not going to believe this. The United States Air Force will no longer teach its cadets about the Tuskegee Airmen because of DEI and Trump's executive orders. They're not going to teach their cadets, their airmen, about the famed, the absolute awesome Tuskegee Airmen. It makes me livid. But I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised. I just wonder, what are black MAGA men, how are they going to spin this? How are black Trump supporters, how are they going to spin this? What are they going to say now? There's no way to spin this, but I'm sure they'll think of something. Let's go to the story. Here's an article here in the AP. Let's read it. More DEI fallout. Air Force scraps course that used videos of Tuskegee Airmen and female World War II pilots. Look at this. And look at those men. Look at those men who were actually Tuskegee Airmen, who did a tremendous job during World War II, serving this country, risking their lives. Let's read the article. It says right here, the Air Force has removed training courses with videos of its storied Tuskegee Airmen and the Women Air Force Service Pilots, or WASP, the female World War II pilots who were vital in ferrying warplanes for the military to comply with the Trump administration's crackdown on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. This has gone way too far. These men did nothing wrong. They served their country with honor and distinction and great competence. Yet because of this DEI, anti-DEI stuff, they're getting disrespected. The videos were shown to Air Force troops as part of DEI courses that they took during basic military training. One of the questions I would ask right off the bat, why were these shared only during DEI courses in the first place? They should have been a part of the regular curriculum, just as a part of your training. So they should have never been relegated just to DEI courses. Hello, everyone. I got great news. The merch is finally here. We've been waiting and waiting, but we can finally begin branding our channel. But we need your help to get our brand out there. If you like what we provide and like what you see, please go to the channel and grab your hoodie, your t-shirt, your mug, and we got more designs and products on the way. Just visit our YouTube channel at the Defiant Lawyers Network. Also, we will donate a portion of each dollar you spend on our merch towards some nonprofit. And remember, as always, stay woke. In a statement, the Air Force confirmed the courses with those videos had been removed and said it, quote, will fully execute and implement all directives outlined in the executive orders issued by the President, ensuring that they are carried out with utmost professionalism, efficiency, and in alignment with national security objectives. Close quote. What am I missing? What is it about national security? What does that have to do with showing Tuskegee Airmen who, again, risked their lives defeating and fighting Nazis, and who oftentimes, upon coming home or even over in Germany, they didn't get the respect they deserved from American airmen, white American airmen. They were treated worse than the Nazis. And here now, they're not being celebrated anymore because of anti-DEI objectives. Again, I just want to know, what in the world will black conservatives say? What would Tim Scott say? What would Byron Donalds say? What are they going to say? What are some of these pro-black imposters going to say? How are they going to spin this? I'm waiting. I'm waiting to see exactly how they're going to do this, because this is inexcusable. The problem may not be with the historical videos themselves, but that they were used in Air Force basic military training DEI coursework. Right. So why were they a part of DEI in the DEI coursework in the first place? Why? What is that all about? What is that all about? That should have been a part of just folks training. Those were excellent pilots. They were excellent pilots. However, the lack of clear guidance has sent the Air Force and other agencies scrambling to take the broadest approach to what content is removed to make sure they are in compliance. They got to make sure that they're doing exactly what Trump is saying. The Tuskegee Airmen, known as the Red Tails, were the nation's first black military pilots who served in a segregated World War II unit, and their all-black 332nd Fighter Group had one of the lowest loss records of all the bomber escorts in the war. I saw the movie. I don't know if you saw the movie Red Tails, but in the movie, the white pilots requested the Red Tails. They were so good at what they do, assuming that that part of that movie was accurate and based on facts. They flew P-47 Thunderbolt, P-51 Mustang, and other fighters to escort American bombers on dangerous missions over Germany. Before the fighter escorts began accompanying the slow and heavy U.S. bombers, losses were catastrophic due to getting dive bombed by German aircraft. President George W. Bush awarded the Tuskegee Airmen the Congressional Gold Medal in a ceremony at the Capitol Rotunda in 2007. I remember that. It was a beautiful occasion. In 2020, in his State of the Union address, President Donald Trump announced he had promoted one of the last surviving Tuskegee Airmen, Charles McGee, to Brigadier General. McGee died in 2022 at age 102. So, on one hand, Trump honors this one airman. On the other hand, they end up getting kicked out of the Air Force training program because they were part of the DEI program. I mean, make that make sense. I don't know. Maybe they'll come out and explain why the contradiction. I have no idea. All I know is this is crazy. This is crazy. And what I'm hoping happens here is that this famed, storied, tremendously competent, excellent pilot group of African-American men, I'm hoping that their videos will be restored as a part of the Air Force training for everyone, unrelated to DEI, just because they were excellent pilots who served their country, who saved lives in combat, and were never really given the respect that they deserve. Again, they were treated worse than the Nazis by white American airmen. I mean, that's proven. That's a part of our history. You can't write that out. You can't overlook that. That is a part of our history as well. The WASP contributed to, let's go back over to the article. The WASP contributed to World War II by learning to fly and ferry new bombers off the assembly lines to airfields where they were needed to ship off to war, freeing up male pilots to focus on combat missions overseas. They earned the right to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery just in the last decade. The Air Force, like other branches, has recently tried to broaden the number of people they reach to consider military careers like aviation that historically have had few minority service members in their ranks. Well, good luck treating the Tuskegee Airmen like this. That certainly won't help. And let me just say in closing, the assumption is that if it is or was DEI related or associated, then that person or group of people were unqualified or less qualified than a white pilot, a white doctor, or a white engineer. That's abhorrent. I could go deeper into this, but I just had to share my outrage. And there are two things I'm waiting to hear. Number one, I'm waiting to hear how this is going to be spun by black MAGA men, black conservatives. I'm waiting to hear why Trump did in 2020, elevated that one Tuskegee pilot, and then comes right back 4 years later, and their videos are pulled as a part of an executive order that he put out. You know, those executive orders he put out this past week having to do with DEI. So unfortunate. So very unfortunate. And the third thing I want to hear is that they have been restored. Their videos have been restored as a part of the Air Force training program. Not because they're black, but because they were very good pilots who saved lives while at the same time being disrespected. They deserve more. They deserve better. All right, so I wanted to share this with you because it kind of had me hot under the collar. Still does. What do we have to do to earn our respect in this country? Anyway, I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video, and remember to always stay woke. Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. In the 1980s, I worked with the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., as well as with both of his sons, Jonathan and Jesse Jr., to help defund apartheid in South Africa. And I ran across a story today that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Had to do with Trump and Elon Musk. And the fact that they are now threatening to cut off aid to South Africa because of South Africa's attempt to try to get back some of the land that was taken from them during apartheid. All right, so I want to get into this story. It's sort of personal for me. And once again, in my opinion, it shows Trump's anti-blackness. Now, some of you will argue that Trump opposed apartheid during the 80s, as evidenced by the fact that he flew Mandela over here on his jet or something, his airplane. I don't know about any of that. I don't know what Trump's position was about apartheid back in the 80s. I don't know whether Trump flew Mandela over here and whether he did so free. I don't know. I do know I read an article saying he charged him money, but I don't know and I don't care. I know that this situation today, threatening to stop aid to South Africa because of what many have said are bogus claims that the South African government is taking property unfairly and unjustly from whites in South Africa, that to me is totally, absolutely bogus. I want to look into it. So let's go over and look at this story that I found on Bloomberg.com. And the title of the story is Why Trump is Taking Aim at South Africa's Land Laws. And so let's read some of this article. It says, land ownership in South Africa remains an explosive issue more than 3 decades later after white minority rule ended and the new U.S. president has added more fuel to the fire. Following the adoption of a law that will make it easier for South African government to expropriate land, President Donald Trump said America would halt all aid to the country. Posting on his Truth Social platform, Trump accused South Africa's government of, quote, treating certain classes of people very, very badly, close quote, by confiscating land, which he said constitute a massive human rights violation at a minimum. Now let's get our heads around this. We're talking about land that was stolen from black South Africans, okay? Black South Africans for many, many, many years. That's what apartheid was all about. It was basically a slave system, right? Where the white minority, the Afrikaners, essentially stole and appropriated, you're talking about appropriating land, stole and appropriated vast, vast sums of land in South Africa. All right? And not only that, they committed all types of human rights violations, civil rights violations. We know the great Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for, almost 3 decades fighting that white supremacist system. And when apartheid ended, I believe in 1994, even since then, those whites, that white minority, continue to own vast sums of land in South Africa. And so the blacks in South Africa, they make up the majority, but they still don't have their fair share of the pie, of the land. And we know whoever owns the land will control the economy and everything else. Yet, in Trump's mind, it is the whites who are being treated unfairly. It is the same argument that he makes here in America. Whites are the ones here who are being treated unfairly in his mind, although whites own nearly all the wealth in America. I mean, his thinking about these racial issues is very, very twisted and racist. All right, let's go back to the story. So it says he vowed that the U.S., quote, won't stand for it, close quote, and would cut off all future funding until a full investigation is completed. While the South African government said Trump misunderstood the intention of its new expropriation act, the deferral sparked a sell-off of the rand, which is their currency, which is South Africa's currency. Why did South Africa change its land laws? Now watch this. Most black South Africans were stripped of their right to own property during the colonial and apartheid eras, and white people continued to control the vast majority of farmland despite accounting for just 7% of the population. And so today, 7% of the population own a majority of the land 30 years after apartheid. The African National Congress, the country's biggest political party, proposed changing the Constitution in 2017 to make it easier for the state to seize land, in some cases without paying for it, a move it said was needed to give more people access to land and ensure it was optimally used. But the amendment failed to win the required support from 2/3 of legislators and was dropped in 2021. The ANC then said it could achieve its land redistribution goals through the standalone Expropriation Act, which only needed a simple majority in Parliament to pass. And President Cyril Ramaphosa signed the bill into law in January 2025. The act replaces and updates legislation that dates back to 1975, the height of the apartheid era, which helps cement the racial wealth gap that persists today. So it says, what's so contentious about the new law? The Expropriation Act gives the government the power to take land in the public interest on the condition the owner receives just and equitable compensation, which is extremely similar to what the government can do here in America. Very, very, very similar. It contains a provision for nothing to be paid in some instances, such as when land isn't being used or has been acquired for speculative purposes with no concrete intention to develop it. Any seizures can be challenged on the ground that they violate the Constitution, which safeguards property rights. Again, this is really similar to what we have here in the law. Anyway, critics say the law is vague and open to interpretation and that it will negatively impact food security, investor confidence, and economic stability. Its opponents include some members of South Africa's 10-party coalition government, which was set up after the ANC lost its parliamentary majority in the May 2024 election. The financial risks posed by expropriation are evident in neighboring Zimbabwe, where the economy has yet to recover from the seizure of thousands of white-owned farms by ruling party-backed militants 2 decades ago. Ramaphosa insists wholesale land grabs aren't on his government's agenda. The president of Zimbabwe at that time, the president who actually tried to seize thousands of white-owned farms, because Zimbabwe also suffered at the hands of the white minority, but his name was Robert Mugabe. And President Mugabe fought against white supremacy. And the country, it was named Rhodesia after Cecil Rhodes, who was an imperialist, a white supremacist who made large amounts of money off the South African people. And the name of the country was changed back to Zimbabwe. And yes, Western nations attacked Zimbabwe for trying to take back land that was unjustly taken from them. And that caused the Zimbabwe economy to experience tremendous inflation, tremendous. And yes, it brought the economy to its knees, right? So they're saying that South Africa could experience the same thing if they went through with appropriating land from those white farmers, and Trump has weighed in on this. But both countries are simply trying to right wrongs that have been done to Black Africans. That's all. They're trying to right wrongs that were done to Black Africans. So why did Trump wade in? It's not a new gripe for Trump, the article says. During his first term in the White House, he asked then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to study land seizures in South Africa, claiming without evidence that there was large-scale killing of farmers. Elon Musk, Trump's South African-born billionaire backer, has also spread the conspiracy theory that there is a genocide against white farmers in the country. After Ramaphosa defended the new expropriation law from Trump's attacks, Musk accused the South African government of having, quote, openly racist ownership laws, close quote, in a post on his social media platform, X. Both Trump and Musk interventions come amid a push at home here in America to end diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and this anti-DEI crusade has seemingly now extended to U.S. foreign policy. So there is the reason why, according to Bloomberg, Trump has waded in. Now, how did the South African government respond? The government argued that Trump has misinterpreted the new law. Quote, "We trust that President Trump's advisors will utilize the investigative period to gain a comprehensive understanding of South Africa's policies." International Relations and Cooperation Minister Ron Lamolo said. Ramaphosa denied any land has been seized and emphasized that South Africa is a constitutional democracy. Quote, "Deeply rooted in the rule of law, justice, and equality," close quote. He said the Expropriation Act isn't a, quote, confiscation instrument, close quote, but, and listen carefully, but a constitutionally mandated legal process that ensured public access to land in an equitable and just manner as guided by the Constitution. South Africa has always had expropriation laws, as does the U.S. and other countries, that balance the need for public usage of land and the protection of rights of property owners according to the government. Ramaphosa said he looks forward to engaging with the Trump administration over the land reform policy and reaching a common understanding. Now, I'm not going to continue to read this. I will read the very last paragraph. Trump also threatened the BRICS bloc of nations, of which South Africa is the S, with a 100% tariff if the group established its own currency to rival the US dollar. I'm talking about the anti-Black position that I believe Trump has taken by trying to prevent the South African government to take land back from people, white people who took it unjustly in the first place. You can call that reparation, you can call that restitution, you can call it whatever you want. But for me, it's a matter of simple justice and righteousness. That's all that is, justice and righteousness. It is not fair that 93% of South Africans' population, which are Black, to still be suffering economically 3 decades after apartheid, and considering all the suffering they did during apartheid, and to now have the President of the United States of America siding with the descendants of that apartheid regime, as well as Elon Musk, who is from South Africa. That is just, again, unjust, and it's not right. And so I wanted to bring this story to your attention. All right, once again, we see the anti-Blackness of the Trump administration and MAGA. So we got to keep calling it out. We can't be silent. We cannot be silent. We must continue to call it out. It is our duty, based on Holy Scripture, which tells us in Isaiah chapter 1, verse 17, seek justice, rebuke the oppressor. That is in the Scripture. That is the Bible. Okay? All right, so I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video. And as I say at the end of all my videos, no matter what, stay woke. Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book, because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. Hello, everybody. I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you're having a good day. Let's get into this. So another judge, this time a judge out of Maryland, has blocked Trump's birthright citizenship effort. All right? Another judge. So let's get right into it. I'm reading from an article published by CNN, and the title is Federal Judge in Maryland Blocks Trump's Birthright Citizenship Order. And by the way, this time it is a nationwide block. All right? The judge applied her ruling to the nation. So this won't go forward unless it's going to be appealed to the Fourth Circuit, which is there in Richmond, Virginia. And that appellate court, the Fourth Circuit, will determine whether or not this judge's ruling is, in fact, constitutional. Okay? And that Fourth Circuit, by the way, is a pretty conservative circuit. So there is a chance of it being overturned. But for now, her block extends across the nation. Let's read some of this. All right. A federal judge Tuesday indefinitely blocked President Donald Trump's effort to curb birthright citizenship for the children of undocumented immigrants and foreigners with temporary visas, a decision that is likely to mean the executive order will not take effect as planned later this month. U.S. District Judge Deborah Boardman issued a preliminary injunction after a court hearing in Greenbelt, Maryland, in a lawsuit brought by civil rights groups aiming at stopping Trump's order on the grounds that it violates the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. Now, this preliminary injunction means that it's blocked or it's stopped. All right, it's not just a temporary restraining order. It is a preliminary injunction. It's not permanent. It's a preliminary injunction until the case is adjudicated and goes through the federal court system. Obviously, no matter what happens in the Fourth Circuit, the case is going to be appealed to the United States Supreme Court. And that's really where Trump and MAGA wants it in the first place, because they know they have 6 conservatives on the court. All right. Now, to understand how this whole matter has been decided in the past, go to a recent video. I've done 2 videos on birthright citizenship. The last one, I went in depth on a very important case regarding birthright citizenship. Okay. Wong Kim Ark. The name of the case is United States versus Wong Kim Ark. And it just lays out, how birthright citizenship works. And I went through that case and I showed you that Trump's executive order was absolutely wrong. It was not consistent with the United States Constitution. Hello, everyone. I got great news. The merch is finally here. We've been waiting and waiting, but we can finally begin branding our channel. But we need your help to get our brand out there. If you like what we provide and like what you see, please go to the channel and grab your hoodie, your t-shirt, your mug, and we got more designs and products on the way. Just visit our YouTube channel at the Defiant Lawyers Network. Also, we will donate a portion of each dollar you spend on our merch towards some nonprofit. And remember, as always, stay woke. But I also cautioned in that video that the United States Supreme Court, I believe, is likely to amend, to change what the 14th Amendment says and overturn the case that essentially says if you're born here and subject to the jurisdiction of this country, meaning your parents are not diplomats or ambassadors, nor is your parent from a hostile country that is doing hostility here, then you're a citizen, automatically, point blank. All right. And it was added, the 14th Amendment was added because of the Dred Scott decision, which said African Americans at that time were not citizens. Were not citizens because we had come here from Africa. So the 14th Amendment was added during Reconstruction following the Civil War. It gave us citizenship. And because it is a case that was added because of us and deals with our citizenship, as an African American, I don't like seeing Trump or anyone else tinkering with the 14th Amendment. All right. The court has said, the United States Supreme Court has already said how birthright citizenship works, and that should be the end of it. I just don't like it, because if they start tinkering with it, they can keep tinkering with it, right? They may want to do something to our citizenship. Now, non-lawyers are running around here saying, well, they can't change the Constitution to impact African Americans. That's not true. SCOTUS, the United States Supreme Court, can interpret the Constitution in a way that basically changes it without amending it, right? Just like it has interpreted the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the Seventh Amendment, and so on, in a way that basically changed the meaning of those amendments. So don't say what SCOTUS can do. SCOTUS is the final arbiter of the law in our country. So don't listen to some non-lawyer who tells you that, well, African-American people are protected and Trump is not going to do something. You don't know. They don't know. I don't know what MAGA has up its sleeves. I just know they're anti-black. And so therefore I don't trust him. And I don't want SCOTUS messing with the 14th Amendment. Because again, SCOTUS can change what it wants. It is the final arbiter of our law. So they can change it if they so desire. All right, now, so let's pick up here. I just want to read a little bit more. The injunction, let me go back to that screen. The injunction applies nationally and will remain in place as the case is adjudicated. So while the case is going through the system, it will remain, this case will remain on hold. Okay, birthright citizenship will maintain the status quo. Not the way Trump said it should be in his executive order, but the way it has been for centuries. Centuries. Okay? The Maryland lawsuit is one of at least 6 federal cases brought against Trump's order by a total of 22 Democratic-led states and more than a half dozen civil rights groups. A federal judge in Seattle previously issued a 14-day restraining order. All right, this preliminary injunction is stronger than a temporary restraining order, which lasts every 14 days. It has to be renewed. This doesn't have to be renewed. This will be in place until some higher court overturns it. Otherwise, it'll be in place. In issuing the injunction, Boardsman said the plaintiffs would very likely succeed on the merits in the case against Trump's order, which she said conflicts with the plain language of the 14th Amendment. I completely agree with the last statement. And under normal circumstances, I would completely agree where she said that it's very likely to succeed on the merits in the case against Trump. I don't think that it's very likely because, again, SCOTUS, 6 members who are far right, and they definitely rubber stamp a whole lot of what Trump wants. So I don't know about very likely. Under normal circumstances, it definitely would because, again, the way the 14th Amendment has been interpreted in the past stretches back many years, 100 years with this Wong Kim Art case, and then 200 or 300 years before then under English common law. Okay, under English common law. So, but never say never with this Supreme Court. The Trump administration is expected to appeal Boardman's injunction, according to legal experts. I agree. At a rally after the court hearing, several dozen immigrants gathered at the Langley Park, Maryland office of CASA. That's like an advocacy agency that works with the parents and children. Okay. One of 2 nonprofit groups that filed a lawsuit on behalf of 5 pregnant women whose children would be denied citizenship under Trump's order said, quote, "The people united will never be defeated," they chanted. Now, I mean, we don't have to go any further with this article, but let me just say that this is really important. Birthright citizenship. This can be used to interfere with us in some way. So anyone, if you're a lawyer, you know that this is what we call a slippery slope. I mean, you go down this road and you can start. I mean, if SCOTUS hands down a bad opinion, all that needs to happen at that point is some other organization or some other plaintiff can file a lawsuit, work it up to the Supreme Court, and argue that any one of us, or any one of any group are not citizens. That is my concern. You follow me? That is my concern because a lot of MAGA, some of them, I heard a recent video. The guy said, we're not really Americans. I mean, this is a guy who recently said that. We, African Americans, are not really Americans. That's the way a lot of them feel. So I don't want them tinkering with the 14th Amendment. At the same time, we certainly don't want people coming into the country who shouldn't be here, gangbangers and murderers and bad people, although most people who come here, even those who come here legally based on data, are not those kind of people. They're not those kind of people. But again, we do need to be in control of the border. I agree with Obama's approach to have a strong border while at the same time trying to pass immigration reform so that the people who should be here under our law can get here and can enter. But the first thing is securing the border. I completely agree with that. But don't mess with the 14th Amendment to do it. Anyway, this right here stops all of this for now, unless the Fourth Circuit overturn this judge. And then, as I said, regardless of who loses, it's going to go. They're going to file a writ of certiorari to see if the U.S. Supreme Court will accept the case. And no doubt the U.S. Supreme Court will accept the case. And if Trump lost at the Fourth Circuit, I think there's a good chance that SCOTUS will overturn that loss and maybe do something like simply say, in addition to the exceptions I gave you, parents who are diplomats, parents who are from a hostile country, they may add also parents who are in the country illegally. I don't know. Okay, I don't know, but I think there's a good chance that may happen. But for now, it's stopped. All right, so I wanted to bring that to you, explain that to you. Thank you, as always, for watching the video. I'm sure you got something out of it. I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. As always, as I always say with all my videos, stay woke. Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education in Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. I believe Trump released his most dangerous executive order a couple of days ago. I'm going to explain what I mean in this video because this implicates all of our lives as Americans. And in short, what he seems to be trying to do is gobble up all the power and authority into his powers and authority as the sitting president. Now, why is that problematic? Because it violates the United States Constitution. The framers who were afraid, they were very afraid of having a government where one person had all the power. That is precisely what they were trying to escape when they left England and came here and stole the land and enslaved African Americans. Well, that's for another day. But they were trying to escape the monarchy back in England, the king, the crown. And so they created a government where there are three branches and they are co-equal branches. None of them are more powerful than the other. So Trump is going against that basic, fundamental, constitutional principle. When he, in this executive order, tries to take authority away from both the legislative branch and the judicial branch. So let's look at this executive order and you'll see what I am saying here. Hello, everyone. I got great news. The merch is finally here. We've been waiting and waiting, but we can finally begin branding our channel. But we need your help to get our brand out there. If you like what we provide and like what you see, please go to the channel and grab your hoodie, your t-shirt, your mug, and we got more designs and products on the way. Just visit our YouTube channel at the Defiant Lawyers Network. Also, we will donate a portion of each dollar you spend on our merch towards some nonprofit. And remember, as always, stay woke. So the name of the executive order is Ensuring Accountability for all agencies. It sounds real reasonable and rational until you start digging into the details. What's the old saying? The devil is in the details. So let's go and look at some of the details. All right, Section 1, Policy and Purpose. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to agree with all the sentences that I believe are constitutional, and then I'm going to disagree with the ones that I believe are unconstitutional. Okay? Let's read. The Constitution vests all executive power in the president and charges him with faithfully executing the laws. I agree. Since it would be impossible for the president to single-handedly perform all the executive business of the federal government, the Constitution also provides for subordinate officers to assist the president in his or hers executive duties. I agree. In the exercise of their often considerable authority, these executive branch officials remain subject to the president's ongoing supervision and control. I agree. The president, in turn, is regularly elected by and accountable to the American people. I agree. This is one of the structural safeguards, along with the separation of powers, and that's what I refer to about being three co-equal branches. There is the separation of powers. Anyway, between the executive and legislative branches, regular elections for the Congress, and an independent judiciary whose judges are appointed by the president by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, by which the framers created a government accountable to the American people. I agree with that also, but this executive order does not follow what he just said. However, previous administrations have allowed so-called, quote, independent regulatory agencies, close quote, to operate with minimal presidential supervision. They've done that because that is the law. Now, SCOTUS issued a case, it was either 23 or 24, maybe I think it was 23, where they took a lot of that autonomy away from federal agencies, okay, and put it back with Congress. This current Supreme Court does some of those conservatives have a real issue with regulatory agencies, okay? And they take a swipe at them all the time. So if this executive order reaches SCOTUS, they're probably going to agree with Trump. So that's a spoiler alert. I'm just letting you know that. But we don't have to agree with it because this is the way the U.S. Constitution has been interpreted for hundreds of years. All right, so that's why the other presidents have allowed the federal agencies to have a lot of authority over their doings. Congress created them and then gave them the autonomy to operate as they see fit. Again, SCOTUS hit at that. Anyway, these regulatory agencies currently exercise substantial executive authority without sufficient accountability to the president and through him to the American people. Moreover, these regulatory agencies have been permitted to promulgate significant regulations without review by the president. So he's making the argument here that these regulatory agencies are not as beholden to the president as he thinks they should. So he has issued this executive order, trying to rein them in and bring them under his authority. And he says that is so that those agencies can be responsive to the American people. Well, that sounds good, right? But they're already responsive to the American people in that the American people elected the members of Congress who created those regulatory agencies. So they're already responsive to the American people because the American people voted in the Congress who created the agencies that Trump is talking about. Anyway, he goes on to say, these practices undermine such regulatory agencies' accountability to the American people and prevent a unified and coherent execution of federal law. For the federal government to be truly accountable to the American people, Officials who wield vast executive power must be supervised and controlled by the people's elected president. So there it is. He is grabbing power from Congress because Congress created these agencies and created some of them in such a way that they operate independent of the president. Now, this executive order is making the argument because they're agencies, they are part of the executive branch, and therefore they should come under the control of the chief executive officer of our country, which is the president. But don't forget the separation of powers. Don't forget there are three different co-equal branches: Congress, the president, and the courts, federal courts. And so the Congress has the power and authority to create these agencies and then determine how they operate. That should not come under the control of the president because Congress created them. That is interfering with the separation of powers. Does that make sense? So what we're seeing here is we're seeing the Trump administration, again, overstepping Congress and taking control of agencies that Congress created and determined how they should operate. And that is the move of someone who wants to wield power, all power, under his authority. So it sounds a whole lot like the beginning of authoritarianism. And that's what many people have been concerned about even before Trump was elected, even back in the first administration. Well, it seems as though those people's fears are certainly coming to pass. I know I've done many videos warning the American people, especially African Americans, that this would likely happen. And so we're seeing it actually come to fruition. But this executive order also reaches over into the judicial branch and tries to take authority from them as well. Now, let me show you what I mean. So we're going to jump ahead here and find another spot that I highlighted and wanted to read to you. And it's this section, Section 7, Rules of Conduct Guiding Federal Employees' Interpretation of the Law. The President and the Attorney General, subject to the President's supervision and control, shall provide authoritative interpretation of law for the executive branch. Now, that's problematic in my mind because the Constitution gives the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, the authority to say what the law is. And then there is a case that dates back to 1803, way back then. That's like, 400 years ago, that says the United States Supreme Court says what the law is. It is within the province of SCOTUS to let the country know what the law is. In other words, SCOTUS interprets the law, not the executive branch. And that case is Marbury versus Madison. So now we see the Trump administration is trying to, again, overreach SCOTUS, Congress, and SCOTUS. You see, this should read that the President and the Attorney General, subject to the Supreme Court, shall provide authoritative interpretation of law for the executive branch. In other words, yeah, I can see where the Attorney General and the President has to say what the law is to the executive branch. I can see that. But what they say the law is should be consistent with and subject to what SCOTUS has already said. And if SCOTUS has not said something on a particular area, then they need to file a case and get it in front of SCOTUS so SCOTUS can say. It is not the job of the President and the Attorney General to interpret law for the country. Now, they said for the executive branch. Well, it's a slippery slope. In the law, you have to be always watchful of slippery slopes. So he says the executive branch now And then it becomes the whole government later. So this is problematic as well. And once again, we see the Trump administration overreaching and trying to center all the power and authority of our government in Trump. And that is a problem. It is unconstitutional. Now, like I said earlier, this is a very conservative court, and they don't like a lot of regulation. They don't like these agencies doing things on their own, especially apart from Congress. But it is very feasible. I won't say it's probable, but feasible that this Supreme Court will agree with Trump and give him a whole lot more expansive power as the chief executive of our country. So all that needs to happen there is some states or some organization, and I'm sure it's going to happen, is going to sue about this if they haven't already. And eventually it's going to get to SCOTUS, and SCOTUS is going to interpret the law. SCOTUS is going to have to do what they are tasked with doing constitutionally, which again is interpreting the law. So they're going to have to tell Trump, this is what the law says. But my point is, they are likely to interpret it in a way that agrees with Trump. Now, let me say this before I close. All of this was spelled out and publicized in that 930-something page so-called Mandate for Leadership Project 2025. I did so many videos warning you folks what was coming. And everything I said and predicted is happening in front of our eyes. So the country is having its FAFO moment. And when I say FAFO, I'm talking about fool around and find out. That's what's happening. All right. So I wanted to bring that to you because it is extremely important what is going on in our country. We're experiencing some crazy, crazy times. And I warned you. I told you this would happen if Trump got back in office. And we're only first 4 weeks? We have almost 4 years of this left. And it's going to get a lot worse. Anyway, I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video. And always remember, stay woke. Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. So let's get into this video. This past Friday, a day after Trump hosted a Black History Month sham is what I call it, he turned around and fired 4-star General Charles Q. Brown Jr. as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I told you in that video that that would likely happen. Now, in fairness to Trump, he fired several other high-ranking military officials as well. That's a whole nother story for another day. Anyway, General Brown was immensely qualified. I want to show you a list of some of his accomplishments. I mean, this man was thoroughly qualified. And this comes from the U.S. Air Force. All right, it says, can't read all of it, but it says General Charles Q. Brown Jr. is the 21st chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the nation's highest-ranking military officer, and the principal military advisor to the President, Secretary of Defense, and National Security Council. So he is, get this now, as an African-American man, the nation's highest-ranking military officer. All right? He is immensely qualified. This goes on to say, prior to becoming chairman on October 1, 2023, General Brown served as the 22nd Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force. General Brown earned his commission in 1984 as a distinguished graduate of the Air Force ROTC program at Texas State University. General Brown has served in a variety of positions at the squadron and wing levels, including an assignment to the U.S. Air Force Weapons School as an F-16 Fighting Falcon instructor. Now, I could go on and on and on. The one that I want you to see, most especially, is General Brown is a command pilot with more than 3,100 flight hours, primarily in the F-16, including 130 combat hours, and has flown 20 additional fixed and rotary wing aircraft. Again, the man is immensely qualified. Now watch this long list of accomplishments. This long list of accomplishments for General Brown. All these awards and publications. And what did he get for that? Fired. And the man who replaced him, okay, believe it or not, the man who replaced him was less qualified than General Brown. And we all know, in order for a black person to reach the level that General Brown has reached, he had to pay a black tax by being twice as good as his white counterparts. This black tax was exhibited by the fact that General Brown's replacement, again, is less qualified. He's a 3-star general. And his number one claim to fame for Trump, as far as Trump is concerned, is he is a Trump sycophant, a loyalist. Trump fired General Brown pursuant to MAGA's war against DEI, which stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And General Brown likely sealed his fate when he publicly expressed his struggles with racism following George Floyd's lynching.
As the commander of Pacific Air Forces, a senior leader in our Air Force, and an African American, many of you may be wondering what I'm thinking about the current events surrounding the tragic death of George Floyd. I'm thinking about how full I am with emotion, not just for George Floyd, but the many African Americans that have suffered the same fate as George Floyd. And thinking about a history of racial issues and my own experiences that didn't always sing of liberty and equality. I'm thinking about my Air Force career, where I was often the only African American in my squadron, or as a senior officer, the only African American in the room. I'm thinking about the pressure I felt to perform error-free, especially for supervisors I perceived had expected less from me as an African American. I'm thinking about having to represent by working twice as hard to prove their expectations and perceptions of African Americans were invalid. I'm thinking about the airmen who don't have a life similar to mine and don't have to navigate through two worlds. I'm thinking about how these airmen view racism, whether they don't see it as a problem since it doesn't happen to them, or whether they're empathetic. I'm thinking about our two sons. Now we had to prepare them to live in two worlds. Finally, I'm thinking about my historic nomination to be the first African American to serve as the Air Force Chief of Staff. I'm thinking about the African Americans that went before me to make this opportunity possible. I'm thinking about the immense expectations that come with this historic nomination, particularly through the lens of current events plaguing our nation. I'm thinking about how I may have fallen short in my career and will likely continue falling short living up to all those expectations. I'm thinking about how my nomination provides some hope, but also comes with a heavy burden. That's what I'm thinking about. I want to know what you're thinking about. I want to hear what you're thinking about and how together we can make a difference.
So it was those words and that attitude, one of which was reflective of all the racism he went through, in light of George Floyd's lynching, that got him fired. That's it. Not anything that he did wrong. Nothing. Just merely because he has experienced a lot of systemic racism as he rose through the ranks of the Air Force and became the highest ranking military officer. For Trump's world, for MAGA, that was too much. And for that, it cost him his job. He was fired. And so now Trump is using his anti-DEI war to fire thousands of other federal employees. According to Project 2025, he'll replace these employees with more MAGA sycophants so he can execute his anti-Black MAGA agenda. Trump and MAGA have also successfully used their anti-DEI war to intimidate many private companies to terminate their DEI programs. His anti-Black, anti-DEI war essentially allows white America to legally discriminate against Blacks on the basis of race. That's essentially what the outcome of his DEI war will be. They are breaking America's word as expressed in the Declaration of Independence that says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." We learned this in grade school, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, Trump's anti-DEI war is absolutely inconsistent with those words, right? Absolutely inconsistent. Trump and MAGA are basically also breaking America's constitutional commitment to make this a more perfect union. If Trump and MAGA can eliminate DEI programs, then we embark upon a slippery slope that puts the civil rights laws of the 60s in jeopardy and anything else intended to benefit African American people. I've informed you already that Trump and Ben Carson, for example, weakened the Fair Housing Act of '68 during his first administration. They did that by eliminating the AFFH rule that Obama put in place. Unfortunately, very, very unfortunately, the pro-Black imposters are helping Trump push his anti-Black, anti-DEI war with the use of disinformation. Now, how does that work? How are they doing that? Well, let me explain it to you. I've explained it before, but we got to keep saying things over and over and over again until everybody gets it. So the pro-Black imposters tell Blacks that Trump's war on DEI doesn't really hurt African Americans because DEI was not designed for African Americans. They further argue that it was designed to benefit white women and LGBTQ plus people. So losing it doesn't really hurt African Americans. This argument is much more nuanced than the way they present it. But the way they present it causes a lot of African American people not to fight for DEI and just to sit back and allow Trump and MAGA and the GOP to dismantle DEI programs. But this goes much deeper than that. Much deeper than that. Let me explain. First, white women did receive more DEI benefits than Blacks. But why? The answer is simple. Because white women outnumber Blacks. There are over 100 million white women in America. In contrast, there are only approximately 45 or so million African Americans. This means there are 2 to 2.5 times more white women in America than African Americans. So quite naturally, white women will be overrepresented in everything, including DEI programs. Now, I agree with the pro-Black imposters that Blacks have suffered the most from unjust discrimination. Therefore, we Blacks should be the focus of DEI programs. The problem with creating any program to benefit only Blacks is MAGA and the GOP have hijacked and they use civil rights laws and the 14th Amendment and other civil rights laws to argue against Black-only programs. In other words, they say Black-only programs violate the 14th Amendment, Civil Rights Act, and so on. Still, the pro-Black imposters help the GOP and MAGA get elected, that happened in 2016 and 2024, which did what? It enabled them to continue using the civil rights laws and the 14th Amendment to argue against black-only programs. And that's why I call them pro-black imposters, because they seem on one hand to want to try to help black Americans, but then on the other hand, they're helping the GOP, MAGA, and Trump win elections by telling blacks that voting the couch or voting for Trump is the best thing to do to get the attention of the Democrats. This thing with the Democrats, I don't know if it's a genuine thing or if it is some sort of ploy, okay, to justify helping Trump. But that's the effect of it. Both 2016 and 2024, Trump thanked black voters for voting him in, because a lot of black people voted for him, which gives him the margin, the winning margin. And so how is that benefiting African Americans? Because Trump and his MAGA followers, they go into Congress, they go into the White House, they go into the courts, they go all over the federal government and do what? They rig the system even more against African Americans with the appointment of far-right judges and so on. And this time will be really, really, really serious, maybe even irreversible, because all these people that they're firing, they're going to replace those people with MAGA activists. So it's pathetic and sad to see these folks help Trump win these elections, which ultimately hurt African Americans and hurt the number one thing that they say they're for, reparations. So if you will, make that make sense. Make that make sense. And they are supporting Trump, although Trump is giving no tangibles whatsoever, especially black-only tangibles. All he's doing is offering symbols and talk. And that's all he's going to do. Now, here's the thing. You know, some of these young African-American men think that Trump is all for them. Well, it's not just Trump, even if he were not a white supremacist. It is the system that he leads, the movement that he represents. It is very anti-black. From those who are a part of his cabinet, like Stephen Miller and others, as well as those who are in Congress, right? As well as those who are over state houses and in the governor's seats across the country, they're MAGA. They're not going to do anything to benefit African-American people, no matter how charming Trump can be when he needs to try to get someone to do something that he wants. Are you with me? So again, make it make sense that they are supporting Trump while calling themselves pro-black. It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Meanwhile, it is a statistical nonsense narrative to argue African Americans don't benefit from DEI. In a previous video, I showed you that Target set aside $2 billion specifically to develop black businesses after the Floyd lynching. And the DEI programs in the federal government is having a huge impact on African Americans since we are overrepresented in federal employment. It's one of the few places that we're overrepresented in terms of employment. And it's being reported that cities like D.C. and states like Maryland and Virginia, Northern Virginia, that Alexandria area there, I have a lot of friends in that area, are suffering because they're losing jobs. I have friends who are losing jobs. I have good friends, close friends I've known for 40 years who are losing jobs because of this, who live in that area. So the pro-black imposters, their audiences don't read or fact check them. Instead, they blindly believe everything they tell them. Everything. When a simple Google search would refute arguments that they make all the time. All right? So again, Trump's war against DEI, it is absolutely impacting African American people in a big way. Anyway, I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video, and until the next time, no matter what they say, I don't care. You make sure you stay woke. Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. Black America, what are we doing? Are we so tired and fatigued politically that we're not going to fight for our children and grandchildren? If ever there was a time to stand up for Black children, our children, it is now. So what I want you to do is watch this video until the end because I'll show you how to fight for our children. Now, here's why I say all of this. Donald Trump's executive orders eliminating the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights goes well beyond mere political theatrics. Essentially, they are an open invitation for schools to discriminate against Black children with little or any accountability. Trump is basically fueling anti-Black school racism by shutting down offices for civil rights in the Department of Education, not in the Department of Justice. He's already done that. But I'm talking about offices for civil rights in the Department of Education. Closing these offices will hinder the work of parents and civil rights organizations that have been committed to fighting racism in the classroom for decades, literally. And if you think this won't affect your child or your grandchild, you're being neglectful to your child or grandchild. Because the implications of Trump's executive order are serious regarding our children. I mean, imagine closing down civil rights offices. It is really serious. Now, the implications. First, these orders have shut down 7 out of 12 regional offices of the Department of Education. 7 out of 12. Second, the offices already have a backlog of thousands of civil rights complaints. Third, nearly half of the staff responsible for investigating these thousands of complaints have already left. That means fewer investigations into racial discrimination, obviously. And what many Blacks don't realize, don't know, is Black students are already disproportionately targeted with racism. Here are a few facts to substantiate that. Black children constitute 15% of the U.S. student population. So suspensions and school discipline should be 15% for Black students, right? But nearly 40% of all suspensions are Black kids. And it's not because they misbehave more. It's because of racism. Black students receive suspensions at a rate that is 4 times higher than that of their white counterparts for the same behavior. And that's according to EdWeek. But school discipline is only half the story. Another form of discrimination in schools regarding Black kids is our kids are over-referred to special education. Now listen, if a child needs special education, then that can be a lifesaver, really. They get specialized education, specialized training. But if they don't need it, it can create some problems that can last a lifetime. For example, Being in special education, it denies them the opportunity to take advanced courses, college-ready courses. And second, it stigmatizes them as being slow. And again, that label will follow them throughout school and into life. Now, if you think my words ring hollow or untrue, listen, I have written about this very topic in depth in my book, Education and Justice: How Public Schools Fail African American Males. And I document how schools have for decades perceived Black boys especially as problems to be managed rather than students who are educable. Okay? Trump is now providing a route by which schools can bypass civil rights protections that were put in place to address these issues. However, parents, listen to me. You still have legal rights that you can use to fight back. For example, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination by reason of race, color, national origin in any school receiving federal financial assistance. And that is powerful. That is powerful because those schools don't want to lose those federal dollars. In the event that your child is specifically targeted for his or her race, you can pursue a Title VI lawsuit. But that's not the only legal remedy that you have, fortunately. You also have the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. It is another way in which schools can be held accountable for racial discrimination, because the Equal Protection Clause guarantees that any individual cannot be denied equal protection by any state, and that includes public schools. This means that if schools illegally suspend or discipline or segregate your child, you can sue them in court on that basis as well, or for both reasons. So despite Trump actively attempting to set back civil rights in schools, you still have rights at the state and the federal level. Now, if you suspect that your child is being discriminated against, here are a few things that I want you to do in preparation of the lawsuit. Number one, record everything. Take diligent records of all events, record and keep the dates, keep the places, keep the names of the individuals involved. Number two, communicate with school officials. Let them know, inform them. And I mean the teachers, the counselors, the principals, all the way up to the superintendent's office, if necessary, about your concerns, and demand that they give you a written response. Okay? You may be able to resolve your issue with them, with the local school district. Number three, submit a formal complaint. In the event that your school fails to act, you can file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Education Office for Civil Rights. There are still 5 of those offices left. Just be advised that you're probably going to experience delays thanks to Trump's closures of 7 of those offices. Number 4, consult a civil rights attorney. An attorney can navigate the legal complexities of a Title VI and or equal protection case. Okay? But make sure that attorney has expertise in these areas. 5, collaborate with advocacy groups like the NAACP, the ACLU, and local educational groups. They're there. If they're not there, start one. 6, stay active in the community by joining your local PTA, by attending school board meetings, and so on. Number 7, strengthen state-level protections. So if the federal oversight is being done away with by Trump's executive orders, then urge your state Department of Education to enhance those civil rights laws. Contact your local state representatives, and even on the county level. Listen, this is no coincidence. They planned this, and they told us in Project 2025 that it was going to happen. And I warned you in multiple Project 2025 videos. I warned you. And what did the pro-black imposters do? They told you it was nothing to be concerned about, although they never read Project 2025. And let us be clear about this also. This is far from the first time Trump has attacked civil rights protections. During his first administration, he rolled back Obama-era civil rights policies then as well. And he also nominated Betsy DeVos as the education secretary in his first administration, and she virtually had no experience in this space. And now that he's back in office, he has appointed Linda McMahon to run the department, and like Betsy DeVos, she has virtually no experience in this space. I mean, none. So why does this matter to each and every one of us? It should be obvious, but let me tell you if it's not. It's about our children and grandchildren's future. It's about our posterity. It's about the next generation. It's that simple. We want them to get great educations and not be encumbered with racial discrimination. So when the government fails to protect their civil rights, it's then our obligation to stand up and to act. So let us protect our children. Let us call for accountability. Let us fight, because no child should be denied their right to a great education and be again dealing with a bunch of racial discrimination and nowhere to turn. So if you find this information useful, please share, like, and comment on this video. Also, visit our website at lljp.org and join the movement. And please make a donation. And most importantly, make it your priority to be well informed and to be an active participant in the struggle. I am Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett, and as always, stay woke, and I'll see you in the next video. Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book, because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. Folks, I got to be completely, totally, and brutally honest with you. Our democracy is in grave danger. Our democracy is in grave danger. If we don't fight back, it will not survive. And I spent all of 2024 warning you of this. I warned you. I told you in nearly every video that we were facing an existential threat, not only as a nation, but we as a people. Our democracy is in danger. Now, some of you, I'm sure, felt like the truth was sort of heavy for you to carry, for you to bear. And you wanted me to sugarcoat it, to make it sound funny, to make it sound not so serious. No, I'm an attorney. I know how serious this is. You don't go to the doctor's office and he see a spot on your lung that he believes is cancer, and you all sitting there and laugh and joke, and he doesn't tell you the truth about it. No, you're facing an existential threat to your health. It would be malpractice of him or her not to be brutally honest with you and what you need to do to correct your situation. Well, I'm a professional as well. I take this seriously. But don't take it from me. You don't have to believe me. What about a sitting United States Senator? What about Senator Chris Murphy? He said some things recently in an interview that confirms all that I've told you. He knows a whole lot more about what's going on inside the government than I do. Let's go to Senator Murphy.
What I'm telling you is that if we continue to observe norms, if we continue to engage in business as usual, this democracy could be gone. I don't think we have a year to save American democracy. I think the way the president is acting, using law enforcement to target dissidents, harassing TV stations and radio stations that criticize him, endorsing political violence, puts our democracy at immediate risk. So if you are a Democrat in the Senate or in the House, you have to start acting with urgency. And that is the conversation that we have to start having inside our caucus.
Our new NBC News poll, as you just saw, shows the Democratic Party at an all-time low approval rating. Why do you think Democrats are failing to connect with Americans at this critical moment of urgency, which you described?
Well, it's what I just talked about. I mean, I think Americans want the Democratic Party to stand up and fight and to take risks. Listen, I understand that had we gone into a shutdown, even for a handful of days, it would have been difficult. But it would have sent a message that the Democratic Party is not going to be bullied by Donald Trump. We are not going to let them write spending bills unilaterally that cut programs for people we care about, that give the president new and extraordinary power. I think Democrats in this country, but I think the broad middle of the public as well, want to see our party fighting in exceptional ways. That is the conversation that has to happen inside of the Democratic Party, inside our caucus. And if we don't get that right, if we continue to work with Republicans, if we continue to hand Donald Trump more power, we are going to lose our democracy.
All right, you just heard a sitting U.S. Senator say, if we don't push back and refuse to accept what Trump's doing, our democracy may not last another year. Now, that's not fear-mongering. That's not hyperbole. Those are the facts. I've been warning you myself for at least a year of the threat that Trump and MAGA and the technocrats pose to our country. And as an attorney, I have spent several decades studying and practicing the law. So I know when the foundation of our country, our nation, is being unraveled from within. Because our country's foundation is the law. It is the Constitution, federal statutes, regulations, and so on. So I'm telling you, and I have been telling you, that it's being unraveled right in front of our eyes. And many other lawyers, many black lawyers around the nation who are not a part of MAGA, people like Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris, Jasmine Crockett, and many others have been sounding the alarm because we know what all this means. We know that they are unraveling the very foundation of our democracy, which is the Constitution, the rule of law. And that's weakening the country, and it's posing a serious threat to our democracy. And it's the reason why so many of us seem to be so agitated all the time. And then if you couple my legal knowledge with the fact that I've read Project 2025, you can understand why sometimes I barely can sleep at night. And on top of all that, I know what the Bible says about the end times. And it's the reason why I spent all last year warning you that America would be in deep trouble if Trump was reelected. I told you also African Americans would suffer the most. Still, Trump was reelected with the vote of black people giving him the winning edge and other blacks who set out the election. Several weeks after his victory, if you recall, I made a video warning you that dark days were ahead. That was before Trump was sworn in, and what have we seen? Darkening days, and we still got almost 4 years left. I was referring to the fact that Trump is an existential threat to our democracy. Well, my predictions, My deep concerns for our democracy and for us are happening every day, every single day. Despite what I know about Trump, however, I've tried to keep my videos uplifting and hopeful and so on, because I know you feel anxious, weary, tired. As I just said, I do too. But I got to tell you the truth. I got to tell you the truth, whether you love it or hate it, whether you don't want to hear it, whether you want to put your hands over your ears, cover your eyes, whatever. I got to tell you what's coming, what's happening. And again, that truth is we, Americans, all Americans, but especially us African Americans, we're in deep trouble. We're losing our freedoms that our ancestors fought so hard for. We're losing them. Trump's taking them away. That's because our democracy is barely hanging on. Now, I want to read a portion of a book for you, and it sort of lays things out as well. Let's go to that book. But the old businesses are so profitable that big tech dominates the economy in a way that Rockefeller could have hardly imagined. Harvard historian Jill Lepore says of Elon Musk, quote, he sees himself as above the presidency, close quote. The technocrats have left us with a feeling that there is no alternative to the future they are offering us. But history is not a linear progression toward a technological utopia. In fact, as historians like Arnold Toynbee and Edward Gibbon have written, history is a cyclic process of genesis, growth, breakdown, and disintegration. We already know that history repeats itself because there's nothing new under the sun. American democracy is in danger of breakdown. Peter Thiel has said, quote, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible, close quote. The libertarian choice of the technocrats' freedom over our democracy puts not only our country at risk, but also our planet. Now, who is Peter Thiel? Peter Thiel is one of Trump's billionaire buddies. He's one of the so-called tech bros or technocrats. And he reportedly bankrolled J.D. Vance's political career. So he is definitely connected with Trump and J.D. Vance. And he said, you saw it yourself, he said, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. So you got that kind of person in the ear of the United States president, saying that democracy and freedom are not compatible. You see what I'm saying? And that's the reason why, one of the biggest reasons why our democracy is in such trouble. Trump and MAGA and these technocrats are replacing our democracy with a fascist technocracy under the authoritarian rule of Trump. It's a dictatorial, authoritarian rule that Trump oversees. And the form of government, it seems, that they're trying to establish is a fascist, again, technocracy. And blacks and people of color don't fare well in ultra-nationalist fascist countries. The fascists tend to use efforts like Trump's DEI war to wipe us out, to wipe out our contributions, to wipe out our memory from the national consciousness, or at least to disregard it, such as removing the names of blacks, Latinos, and females from the Arlington National Cemetery records. How heinous that is. Again, it's just pure fascism. And thanks to the United States Supreme Court, no American president has ever had the power and authorities that Trump has. And that's what makes this moment so different. Trump, MAGA, and the, again, technocrats and their money seems intent on using Trump's power and his authorities to destroy our democracy and transform America into a fascist technocracy. They've decided apparently that democracy is an impediment to their white nationalist technocracy oligarchy. They're literally reshaping America. They're picking it apart, weakening our institutions. And they said they would do so in Project 2025. Again, and I'm going to keep saying, I warned you repeatedly last year about Project 2025 and the intentions of these folks. Now, the institution or branch of government that is most problematic for them is the legal institution, specifically the judicial branch, the judges and the lawyers, people like me and others, because we know what's happening and we are communicating it to you as I'm doing now. That's what makes Donald Trump so different and so dangerous. His administration isn't just going after political dissidents, his political opponents. It's taking direct aim at lawyers and law firms that represent his political opponents. I mean, for the first time in U.S. history, a sitting president is weaponizing executive power to punish legal professionals for merely doing their jobs. Just for doing their job. Just for representing people. Now let's break down how Trump is actively intimidating lawyers, or at least trying to, and why that's so unprecedented, and what this means for the future of our democracy and what it means for you. Now let's start with the basics. The U.S. legal system is built on a simple principle. Everyone deserves a defense. Everyone deserves a lawyer when they've been accused of anything. Everyone. Trump had his lawyers. Other defendants have their lawyers. Okay? It is the bedrock of the rule of law. So that means lawyers have to be free to represent people without fear of political retribution. But Trump is trying to change that. Instead of debating policies or arguing his cases in court, he's using his immense presidential powers to punish lawyers who take cases against him. Here's what's happening. Now, I want to show you a couple of law firms here that he has targeted. So there are three: Perkins Coie, LLP, Covington and Burling, LLP, Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, LLP. So he's gone after all three of these law firms, all three of them, and a single lawyer. And these are some of the most powerful law firms in the country, and they have something in common. You know what that is? They all represented cases Trump doesn't like. All right, now let's go law firm by law firm. First, Perkins Coie, LLP. On March 6, 2025, Trump signed an executive order revoking security clearances for Perkins Coie's attorneys, banning them from even entering federal buildings. So you got to ask why. Why would a sitting president do that? Because they were involved in the Steele dossier, and they have ties to the Democratic Party. That's it. And you know what that is? That is just straight up political revenge. And then there's Covington Burling, LLP. And back in February of this year, Trump's administration issued another executive order targeting this law firm. And it was because some of their attorneys had worked with special counsel Jack Smith, who was leading investigations and prosecutions involving Trump. That's right, Trump is actually retaliating against anyone connected to the people who were investigating him. And then that brings me to Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, LLP. Most recently, on March 14th, that was just a couple of days ago, 2025, Trump went after this law firm by suspending their security clearances and terminating their federal contracts. This firm was involved in pro bono work related to the January 6th and some immigrant rights cases. So Trump wants to send a clear message. He wants to send a clear message to law firms and lawyers. If you work against him, you'll pay for it. If you work against him, you'll pay for it. Well, you may say, yeah, but come on now, Mr. Corbett, presidents have always had political enemies. Well, that's true. In fact, Nixon had an enemies list. The FBI's COINTELPRO program spied on civil rights attorneys. I'm well aware of that. But even those weren't as direct as what Trump is doing today. Here's the difference. Trump isn't just harassing or surveilling lawyers. He's using his immense executive power to financially ruin law firms that challenge him. Okay? And he's not stopping there. His administration is also pushing courts to force lawyers and plaintiffs to pay massive legal fees if they bring lawsuits against his policies. This isn't about justice. This is intimidation. And why does it matter to you? Well, there are two reasons. Two very important reasons. First, when we lawyers are too afraid and intimidated to take cases, people lose access to the justice system. If Trump can scare top law firms into breaking down and backing down, what happens to the smaller firms? What happens to everyday Americans who need legal representation? But no lawyer will take the case because of fear of Trump. If Trump gets away with this, what stops future presidents from going after your lawyer? Because your case is unpopular. So that's the first reason. The second reason is if Trump can silence lawyers and law firms, then there'll be no one to activate the third branch of government, the court system, the judicial branch. You see what I'm saying? And it's the judicial branch, it's the judiciary or the judges that are holding Trump accountable, holding him at bay for now. But it takes lawyers to get the judges involved. Without lawyers filing cases, the judges cannot get involved. Judges cannot, or at least are not supposed to get involved in mere political issues. There has to be some case and or controversy for them to get involved. Now, legal experts are already fighting back, okay? For example, Perkins Coie has filed a lawsuit to block Trump's executive order, and a federal judge has already temporarily halted some of the actions, saying that they likely violate the First Amendment and due process clause. So bravo for that judge. The American Bar Association and civil rights groups are condemning these actions, calling them a direct attack and an affront to the rule of law. But here's the thing. Trump's base doesn't care about that. In fact, they love it. They see it as Trump fighting back against the so-called deep state. That's why this is bigger than just Trump. There's a whole movement out there that applauds him as he does these things, these anti-democratic things. But the fight is not over yet. Here's what we need to do. First, as I've said before, we need to flip Congress. We need to flip Congress. If we can survive our democracy until the midterm, we must flip Congress. And I've showed you in other videos that we have the numbers to do it. There were approximately 17 million African Americans who did not vote. Hopefully, they're seeing that that was a mistake. Hopefully, they will see even clearer over the next years from the things that Trump will do that that was a serious mistake. So first, we need to flip Congress. Second, we need to spread the word. Most Americans have no idea this is happening. Have no idea because they don't understand what's really happening. Did you notice a little while ago that I actually read you something from a book? A lot of Americans don't read, and that's why they don't know what's happening. So you have to talk about this. You have to share this video. Talk about this with your family and friends so that they are informed. Third of all, support legal organizations that fight back. Groups like the ACLU, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and other civil rights organizations. Okay? So as I've said already in this video a couple of times, we're in dangerous territory. This isn't even about politics anymore. This is about whether we value and favor our democracy or whether we want to become a technocracy with Trump as an authoritarian type of dictator over the country. It's our choice. It's up to us. All right, so please make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated. And I'm telling you, please hit that notification button so that you'll get notified every time we send these videos out. Also, like, share, and comment. Tell me what you're thinking. Okay? All right, stay vigilant, stay informed, stay defiant, and most of all, stay woke.